Yeah, yeah.
I love that we started with Aaron singing Milli Vanilli. That's outstanding. Baseball America Google Plus Hangout delayed by my boot. I'm
Oh
blaming my
man,
boot.
you're showing the audience the visual. That's unexpected.
It just takes way too long to get from my office to fill in the blank. It is very frustrating. But I have ditched the crutches, so that's a good thing. But it's the worst time of the year to be physically limited, Aaron, because it's draft time and it's college baseball crunch time, and that's what we're going to talk about on today's Google Plus Hangout. I hold in my hand, Aaron, a summary that you printed on the web the other day. I printed it out because I'm old. From your stock report, Aaron, talking about national seeds. We're going to start real quick talking about the national seed picture and what's going on there, and then we'll get into the MLB draft stuff. Um, you're not traveling this weekend, so that's a good thing. But Aaron, last week you saw Oregon State. They swept Oregon, and they really vaulted themselves from, I don't know if you'd say, the bubble of the national seed. I still felt like whoever won the Pac-12, I feel like is going to get a national seed, and that could have been Oregon State, could have been UW. But once Oregon State swept Oregon, even though University of Washington won its series with Washington State and they're still in first place in the league, it feels like Oregon State's really in the driver's seat for being a top eight national seed. And it feels like that's starting to sort itself out. You have teams on the bubble, but it feels like seven of those eight teams to me: Virginia, Florida, Florida State, South Carolina, Oregon State, Indiana, Louisiana, Lafayette. It feels like those teams are going to really have to collapse, lose their last couple of series to fall out of that national seed discussion. For me, are those seven quite secure? And you have Ole Miss as the eighth, and I feel like they were deserving of the eighth. But those first seven are fairly secure because of their bodies of work.
Well, I still think there's enough time for some volatility here. I mean, I think first of all in the SEC, I just think there's so much that can still happen in that league. Those teams are all so good that they're playing that you could see South Carolina or Ole Miss losing a couple series and falling into kind of the middle of the pack in the standings, and all of a sudden, somebody else moves up and takes their place. Whether it's another SEC team like LSU or Alabama, or whether it's somebody like TCU or Rice, I think those teams are kind of, and even Texas Tech and Miami. I mean, Vanderbilt. I mean, all these teams are still in striking distance of a national seed if somebody falters, and so that's why I don't think those teams are quite secure yet. I just think they still have to keep playing well. And I do think I agree with you. I think that the team that wins the Pac-12 will probably get a national seed, and especially Oregon State right now. They made kind of the move that we thought they would make in the RPI. I think they're up to about number 13 now after sweeping Oregon. So they've got a significant RPI advantage over Washington, which is in the mid-20s now, I believe. A couple of midweek losses to Seattle did not help Washington's case, but. The Beavers, to me, the fact that they get UW at home in a couple of weeks, that's another reason why I like Oregon State to win the Pac. And I think Oregon State is just a little more experienced too on the big stage, and that's the other reason that I give Oregon State the edge in the Pac-12. But Indiana, to me, sitting there at number 2 in the RPI, that's the one that maybe it's a little bit of a surprise to people, and the one that gets hackles raised in the SEC and ACC and other parts of the country, where they say, "How is Indiana up there? They haven't beaten anybody." Blah blah blah. Well, you know what? It's hard to build a number 2 RPI when you're located in Bloomington, Indiana. It's not easy to do, and yeah, they get a boost because they're on the road all the time for the first 6 to 8 weeks of the season. Well, let's see some of these SEC teams play on the road for the first 6 to 8 weeks of the season, see how they do. I mean, you should be rewarded for having to travel all the time early in the season. So if you handle that well and you're, 28, 29, and 11, and you've played a solid schedule, I mean, it's not easy to build an elite schedule at Indiana, but they play the good midweek games against Louisville and Kentucky, and they've dominated their league as they were supposed to. They're a legit national seed. I'm sorry they don't have the top 50 record that all these SEC teams have. They don't have the opportunity to play all those teams, but they've proven in the past that they can beat good teams. They proved it last year when they went down to Tallahassee and won a super regional. They proved it in their regional when they had SEC teams there. I think Florida was in that regional. I mean, these guys are legit, And people say, well, that was last year. This is this year. Well, they have a lot of the same players. These guys have proven themselves. It's a very talented team, and they deserve a national seed.
Aaron, the other part of this for Indiana, I think that's crucial for people to understand is that, yeah, they lost two non-conference series at Texas Tech, at Long Beach. First, they were both on the road, and so that RPI looks favorably upon that. Second, Texas Tech and Long Beach State have both had good seasons, especially Texas Tech was at 31-11, ranked in our most recent top 25 for the first time. And Long Beach State really coming on. Crucial series for the Dirtbags this weekend. Now I'm off the. I thought I had it in the top of my head. Are they playing Fullerton or are they playing Irvine this weekend?
It is. I don't think they've got either of this. Is it Irvine? No, it's Irvine's got Santa Barbara this weekend, and Long Beach. I'll just look it up since we're here.
And
But
Long
I
Beach
mean,
State is
you're right.
the Titans. It's the
No,
Titans.
they
So
are.
I knew that. I knew it was.
You had it.
I mean, back in the Niall Adler days, I know it's pronounced Neil, but back in the Niall Adler Sports Information days, this was touted as the best rivalry in college baseball. And at one time, it was one of the best, and it's still a good rivalry. The Long Beach
Yeah.
State has not gotten to regionals on a consistent basis in recent years. Sad to see, although Long Beach State does have more major leaguers who are alumni of Long Beach State than any other team except for Arizona State right now. So kudos to the 49ers for that. It's weird to call them the 49ers, but they are. That's their official nickname. No one in baseball calls them that. Everyone calls them the Dirtbags. Aaron, I got off track here a little bit, but Indiana, their non-conference schedule, I think, looks better now than it did earlier in the year. And we've mentioned Indiana and Oregon State, two teams that are toward the top of our rankings, two teams that are in right now. We have them as top 8 national seeds, hosting all the way to the College World Series if things worked out for them. Things that these two teams have in common is physicality and offense, and that bridges us to the MLB draft. Hashtag MLB draft. And you saw Conforto last week. You've seen Schwarber. You've seen the Indiana teams. Let's talk about these two teams and you saw Bradley Zimmer last week. In some ways, Kyle Schwarber and Michael Conforto are most similar because they're real physical left-handed bats. Let's compare and contrast those guys because these are when you're lining up college position players for this year's draft. I think we believe that NC State's Trey Turner is still most likely to be the first college position player drafted. I don't think it's a lock anymore. I think Michael Conforto has kind of hit his way into that consideration, Aaron, because he's been so consistent offensively. And while his all-around tools, if you're grading him out old school OFP-wise, he probably grades out lower than Turner because Turner's going to have an 8 on the card with the speed and the 6 defense and at least 5 defense. He's gotten better defensively at shortstop. But it feels like Conforto's made that move up, Aaron, just because he's been so consistently good at the plate.
That's it. To me, I mean, he's the guy that you look at him in the box, and he's just such a presence. That's the way it really struck me watching him for a couple of games last weekend. He just, I wouldn't want to pitch to the guy. He just feels like he's so confident in the box, and he's just an imposing presence. And it feels like he's going to get a hit every time up, and he's going to drive the gap the other way, or he's going to pull one, or he's got opposite field power. And I know he doesn't have a ton of home runs this year, but he's gotten on base at an alarmingly good rate, and I think he still leads the nation in on base percentage. So he's drawing his walks, he's taking what they give him. The guy is a great hitter. He's a really, really great hitter, and he's improved in left field to the point that he's perfectly fine out there. The arm is better than a lot of people give him credit for, I think, and the makeup is fantastic. I mean, everyone who knows the guy says the same thing. I mean, he's got it. That it factor. He's a winner, no doubt about it. And all these guys are. I mean, but I just think Conforto is a really, really safe bet to hit, and that is a separator. And I think Schwarber's like that too. To me, there's not a huge difference between those two bats. They probably both wind up as left fielders. Conforto's already out there, and so he's proven that he can do it. I mean, the fact that Schwarber has at least a chance to maybe catch gives him a little extra value. Most scouts, I guess, don't really think that he will eventually be a catcher, but there's a little bit more, maybe pre-pitch movement, some setup things with Schwarber that some scouts don't like as much. But I mean, the guy he's a physical beast. He's clearly got huge power and a great feel for hitting. To me, he's also right up in that conversation, and those guys are completely different than those live kind of quick twitch athletes, Turner and Zimmer. where I feel like there's probably more question about the bats in both of those cases, and both those guys have hit in the course of their careers. They've hit a lot, but with Zimmer in particular, the setup is kind of unusual. It's a very broad, open base, and he doesn't he doesn't get his hands into hitting position maybe as quickly and consistently as those other guys do, and I don't think the bat path is as direct. So I just think that he's got a knack, certainly a feel for his barrel, but to me, it's just there's more, and I think scouts feel this way. There's a little bit more risk with Zimmer's bat. He can do more things. I mean, he can play center field, and he can really run. He throws fine. I mean, he's very exciting, and he might have the most upside of all these guys if he can put it together, because he could be a five-tool center fielder. But there's also more risk there, and Turner, I feel like there's a little bit of risk with his bat as well. I mean, he's hit a lot in his career also. But John, what have you heard about Turner's bat?
Well, first, I'll second a lot of what you said. I've heard a lot of the same things about those guys, and Kyle Schwarber is fascinating because I definitely think with all catchers there's a sliding scale there, and the more you hit, the better you look defensively. And so, for the scouts who really believe that Kyle Schwarber can hit, I think he'll get more of a chance to catch. Maybe the era is changing in Major League Baseball. If there is more of an emphasis on speed and stolen bases, maybe he gets de-emphasized there. But I think he's got a little bit more athleticism than meets the eye. I think he'll actually wind up being a 45-ish, 40-ish catcher. But if he hits enough, that he will wind up, being a guy who can catch 90 times a year for you and DHs 20-some games. I mean, if Mike Napoli caught in the major leagues, there's some other guys who have, he only moved out because of really the hip. I feel like Schwarber can be that kind of guy where he's offensive enough and he catches early in his big league career, and then he winds up moving to a different position. And it might be left field because he does move fairly well enough to have been recruited as a linebacker by some Big Ten schools in football. But yeah, Trey Turner, the swing's just too long, according to all the scouts I've talked to. The script is kind of flipped on Trey. Last year people loved the speed and the offensive upside potential and questioned Aaron whether he'd be a shortstop or not. And this year all the talk has been this guy can play shortstop. He's an above average defender at shortstop, which is almost like it's probably like the baseline really for a major league shortstop. You have to at least get to this level to be a major league shortstop. And he defends to that level, and he's got arm strength. He can make the play to his right. He's outstanding going to his left. I think the real question is how much impact are you really going to get with this bat? And I think the consensus is that it's very risky, as you said, to project him as a front of the lineup, a top of the lineup guy. He's just not quick to the ball. It's just like you talked about with Zimmer. The path to the ball just is too long for Trey Turner. And, I think scouts were hoping that the best thing that would happen to Trey Turner was that at bat against David Berg last year in Omaha, where he crushed the ball and it didn't get out. And that would encourage Trey Turner to hit the ball on the ground more, take more of a line drive path, and work on emphasize his speed offensively as opposed to getting big too often. But instead, I think being encouraged by the fact that he hit third in the lineup and he leads NC State in home runs, Trey Turner still gets big too often for scouts' tastes and needs to really stick to more of a line drive approach. So to me, those are the four college bats. Is there any other college hitter, Aaron, that you like as a sleeper? Is it maybe the teammates of these guys at Oregon State? Michael Conforto has Dylan Davis as his wingman. Sam Travis is the wingman for Kyle Schwarber. Is actually having a little bit better year there for Indiana. Feels like both those guys don't profile as first rounders or supplemental guys. Maybe they're more third and fourth round guys. But is there another college hitter you see that should be in this conversation?
Well, excuse me, I actually do like both those guys quite a bit, and Travis in particular, I've always been very high on. I just think that guy can really, really hit and hit for power, and I've seen him hit balls a ton in places where the balls don't carry. I mean, I'm still thinking back to the Big Ten tournament in Minneapolis, which was kind of a graveyard that weekend, and I think it usually is. And he
big league
crushed.
ballpark too, Aaron. I mean, that's pertinent here. They played
Yeah.
at Target Field, a big league ballpark that's not known as an offensive ballpark.
That's right, and he just hit a couple of balls a mile. I mean, the guy's really strong, and that was with a messed up wrist or something. I mean, it is now that he's been full strength this year, he's had a great year. I really like that guy. I mean, he's going to be a first baseman. That's what he is. But I think he's going to hit enough to be an everyday first baseman. I think he's got that kind of ability, and so does Casey Gillespie at Wichita State. A switch hitter with big time power who's had a fantastic year. I really like both those bats. And again, they're one-dimensional guys, but there are some bats in this class that maybe they don't do a lot of other things, but they do hit. And those two guys come to mind. I mean, I think certainly Mike Pappy and Derek Fisher at Virginia are guys you have to look at, guys that are going to hit. There's no question about it. Those guys are going to hit, and everyone loves Pappy's approach. The on-base ability there is pretty unique. He draws a lot of walks, and he does have strength in his swing. I like that profile a lot. The guy that walks a ton and has power. It's usually a good place to start. And then Fisher just has a sweet swing and a lot of athleticism. Those two guys, I think, I'm also pretty high on. So people are banging on this group of bats, and there's not a lot of depth. But I actually kind of like the guys at the top. I mean, again, some of them are fairly one-dimensional. Then you got a guy like Max Pentecost, who's a catcher with offensive upside, and a guy that I think will stay behind the plate and can hit. I mean, that's another one that I bet that guy goes up there pretty good because he's one of the more well-rounded hitters in this class. So I know a lot of scouts are disappointed maybe in the depth of college hitters in this class, but I think there's actually a decent group of guys at the top that are going to hit in the big leagues.
I think you nailed it on Max Pentecost. I think we have that top four, but I think Max Pentecost is most likely the fifth college position player drafted after some order of Turner, Conforto, Schwarber, and Zimmer. Those four guys. I think it could be in 30 different ways on multiple different boards in different orders. But for me, Max Pentecost is probably the fifth, and he might sneak into that top four because he is an athletic catcher who shows you some offensive upside, Aaron. So good stuff. Good MLB draft dope from Aaron Fitt. I like the fact that, Aaron, that you like players. At the end of the day, we can nitpick and bang on all these guys and criticize them all, but someone's going to get drafted in the first round, and they're going to, and these guys are going to, so a lot of these guys are going to be major league players, and so are players that we didn't talk about. So it's fun to nitpick, and it makes you sound like an expert to talk about what guys can't do a lot of the time, but or relegate a pitcher to the bullpen, but a lot of these guys can do a lot of good things for your team, and they're going to be major league players. So, Aaron, are you taking in any games in person this weekend? It doesn't seem like the local schedule is tremendous here in the Carolinas.
No, there's not a lot around here that's fantastic, and of course, even around the country, a lot of teams have non-conference action or just off for exams. So I think I'm going to take advantage of the weekend, the light slate of games, and bear down on the draft stuff here since our first draft preview issue goes to press next week. Boy, it comes up fast.
It does, Aaron, but we've all got a lot of work to do. But it's a lot of work to do, but it's a lot of fun work. This is one of the best times of the year in terms of just having fun conversations on the phone with scouts, college coaches, evaluators, all that kind of good stuff. So good stuff on today's Google Hangout, Aaron. Of course, we'll be back on Monday with the Baseball America College podcast brought to you by Louisville Slugger. You can send us emails for that at podcast@baseballamerica.com. We're both accessible virtually 24/7. We won't necessarily immediately answer in the wee hours of the morning, but it seems like that doesn't stop people from tweeting at Aaron Fitt or at John Manuel BA. So for Aaron, I'm John. We'll talk to you on next week's Google Plus Hangout. Peace out.